Morning held Asheville like a breath. The square woke slow, storefront windows collecting a thin film of light, pigeons testing the edges of silence. A courthouse clock blinked past 9. Across from it, the diner kept its neon sign dim, as if not to disturb the trees. People came in on footsteps that tried not to echo. Coffee steamed under the bell that never rang loudly. He was already there. The clown. White grease paint softened to the pale of old paper. A single blue tear lifted from his cheekbone like a smudge caught mid-thought. A dark coat that had known rain. Red shoes, not bright, muted, scuffed, the color of a stop sign seen through fog. He hadn't spoken to anyone in the 2 weeks he'd been noticed. He sat in the corner booth and watched the door the way one watches waves, counting without numbers. The town had begun to leave him be, the way it learned to leave certain gravestones alone. Lena came most mornings and took the table by the window, where she could see past the square to the open field beyond the hardware store. She worked at the nursery out by the bypass, dirt under her nails no matter how she scrubbed. Her left hand found her right wrist when she thought no one was looking. Sometimes she would palm the small gold button she kept in her pocket and roll it until the edge left a neat circle on her skin. She smiled with her mouth and not her eyes. Today, she didn't even try. A man in a brown jacket had been leaning against the lamppost outside for 3 days, speaking to no one, smoking without taking much from the cigarette but the gesture. When he glanced in, Lena bent to study the menu she knew by heart. The diner had the kind of quiet that heard its own history. At the counter, you could feel where elbows had worn the varnish down to satin. A boy in a Letterman jacket traced that track while pretending to read a paperback. The cook moved in slow loops behind the pass, shoulders rounded to hold heat. And then there was the waiter. He was new to town. College somewhere far, a summer back home, and a job he did not want. His name tag, Mark, sat crooked, the letters sharp as if recently carved. He had decided the clown was a problem the way some people decide weather is an insult. The first day he'd stared too long. The second he'd pretended not to see him at all. This morning, when the clown lifted a hand for a refill, Mark's smile cut sideways. "We're full up," he said, glancing at the empty booths. "Management policy." He set the pot down just out of reach. The bell above the door chimed, and chatter hushed on instinct. You could hear the coffee drip back into itself. The clown lowered his hand. He didn't blink. You could have placed a glass of water on the stillness of him and watched the surface remain perfect. He didn't look hurt. He looked like a room that had been emptied carefully. Lena felt the small button press into her palm. She looked from the clown to the brown jacket man outside and back again. A woman at the counter coughed and then regretted the noise. Mark leaned closer to the clown, elbows on the table, a rehearsed grin relit. "You hear me?" he said, softer. "I'm talking to you." The clown turned his face, not away but slightly, enough to offer the space back. He lifted the napkin dispenser and made a place for the pot beside it, as if kindness were furniture waiting to be set down. "I said," Mark began, and his voice snagged. He was young enough to still be afraid of the wrong kind of silence. He looked around for approval that didn't come and found only his own reflection in the chrome. Lena stood without sound and crossed to the counter. She kept her eyes low. "Can I get a hot water?" she asked. "For tea." Her voice was the hush of shoes on gym floors after a game is over. Mark poured and slid the cup toward her with just a little too much force. Some sloshed. At the window, the brown jacket man lifted his chin as if he could smell the moment turning. He watched his cigarette burn down to a soft, stubborn star. In the street, a delivery truck idled, and even its rumble seemed to wait. Lena carried the hot water past the clown and paused. She set it down at his table. Her hand did not touch his, but it hovered close enough to feel his calm like shade. She placed a single tea bag beside the cup, the cheap kind, the paper tag damp at the edge. The clown nodded once, a movement so small it could have been a breath. He unwrapped the string with care that made time slow in the booth. Steam curled between them like a secret learning its shape. Mark laughed, but it was too loud for the room. "You covering his bill now?" he asked. "You his keeper?" Lena didn't look at him. "He's a person," she said, like she was reminding herself. Her eyes found the open field beyond the glass, a square of wildness keeping time with the sky. Her wrist had a faint ring on it that would fade by noon. She let her hand fall to her side. Outside, the man in the brown jacket shifted, and his shadow slid across the door. The clown lifted the cup and held it with both hands, warming his palms. He stared at the surface the way you look at a lake before you decide to step in. The room, threaded with little lives, tightened around a choice that hadn't been made yet. The courthouse clock kept counting. A fork scraped a plate and then went still. Mark reached for the pot again, as if to reassert some rule he'd written for himself. His reflection shook in the chrome. He didn't notice the cook watching from the pass, or the letterman boy watching the cook, or the man outside watching everything with the patience of bad weather. The clown did. He noticed and remained, steady as a tree in wind that hadn't arrived. No one spoke. The town seemed to breathe in. In the quiet, a door at the back of the diner clicked shut, careful, final. Lena's shoulders drew in by a thread's width. The clown set the cup down, eyes moving to that hallway as if he could see the shape of a voice waiting there. But no one in that town could imagine what would come next. The sound of that back door closing lingered in the air longer than it should have, like a period placed in the wrong sentence. The cook glanced up, wiped his hands, and went still. No one moved right away, not even Mark. The diner's small hum, the fan, the clock, the hiss of the coffee pot, seemed to flatten, as though the room itself were listening. The clown's eyes stayed on that hallway. He didn't rise. He simply turned his head slightly, as if following a scent in the air. Lena's hands trembled just once, enough to make the spoon on her saucer tremor against the cup. She looked down and whispered something too quiet to catch. When she looked up again, her eyes found the brown jacket man outside, and he was gone. Mark busied himself with a towel, muttering half to himself. He didn't like how quiet it had become. He didn't like how the clown hadn't reacted. The silence felt personal somehow, like a mirror that refused to lie. He turned toward Lena, meaning to speak, but she was already walking toward the back, the hallway light flickering over her shoulders. No one stopped her. Maybe because no one wanted to be the one who did. The clown stood then. The chair gave a soft scrape, almost apologetic. He adjusted the collar of his coat and followed, his pace slow, his steps deliberate, as if giving the world time to breathe before each footfall. A child outside the diner pressed her face to the glass to see him pass. Her mother gently pulled her away without looking in. The hallway was narrow and smelled faintly of lemons and rain-soaked wood. A broom leaned against the wall, its shadow reaching toward the end of the corridor, where the door had closed. Lena was there, her back to him, one hand on the knob, the other braced against the frame. Her breathing was steady but shallow. She didn't turn. "I told you not to come here," a man's voice said from beyond the door. Calm, low, dangerous only in its calm. "You don't belong here anymore." Lena's shoulders flinched. The clown stopped where the tile ended and the old wood began, as if the change in material marked some kind of boundary he was not meant to cross. He didn't move. He waited. The voice came again. "You hear me? You're done." The clown's head tilted slightly, the way someone might listen to a bird cry in fog, not for words, but for meaning. A silence folded itself over the next few seconds, thick as wool. Then the door cracked open, just enough for the man behind it to appear. He wasn't large, but he carried himself like someone used to taking space. His shirt was clean, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the clown with brief contempt that turned to something uncertain. Maybe confusion. Maybe memory. He frowned and stepped halfway out, the light behind him yellow and sickly. "Who's this?" he asked Lena. She didn't answer. Her fingers twisted the button in her pocket. The man's gaze flicked to the clown again. "You think paint makes you brave?" The clown's expression didn't change. He simply stood there, holding the silence like a weight. The man shifted, uncomfortable, then tried again. "You're scaring her. Take that face and get out." The cook's voice came faintly from the counter. "Everything all right back there?" The man didn't answer. He reached past Lena to shut the door again. Quick, hard, but the clown lifted his hand and pressed 2 fingers lightly against the frame. The gesture stopped the movement, not by force, but by stillness. The man froze, and for a moment no one breathed. The clown looked at Lena then, his eyes soft, searching. She met them. Whatever passed between them was silent and clean. Something understood without words. Her fingers relaxed around the button. She stepped aside. The man at the door stared, waiting for something to happen that never did. The clown lowered his hand, turned, and walked back down the hallway, the sound of his steps fading into the hum of the diner. Lena followed a few beats later, slower, her expression unreadable. When they emerged, the air had shifted. The cook was wiping the counter, eyes darting between them. Mark pretended to refill a sugar jar. Outside, a breeze had moved in from the fields, carrying dust and the faint smell of rain. The clown returned to his booth. He didn't sit right away. He stood looking at the window, at the world reflected in the glass, the town square, the church steeple, the faint motion of a cloud. Then he looked down at the table where the tea had gone cold. He placed a single coin beside the cup. Not payment. Something like farewell. Lena sat across from him, uninvited but not unwelcome. Her hands were empty now. "You shouldn't have," she whispered. The clown tilted his head, almost smiling, though the paint made it look like sorrow. The bell above the door chimed again. Everyone turned. The brown jacket man stepped inside, eyes sweeping the room, expression unreadable. He saw Lena. He saw the clown. His jaw moved once, but no words came. Outside, the wind picked up. A napkin lifted from the counter and drifted to the floor, curling against the clown's shoe. He looked down, bent slowly, and picked it up, setting it neatly back where it belonged. The simple act made the room breathe again. But somewhere deep in that quiet town, something had begun to turn, and none of them yet understood what it would mean. The brown jacket man chose a table without asking, the one that faced the whole room like a stage. He sat with his back to the window, eyes steady, as if he'd been walking all morning just to arrive at that chair. He didn't take off his coat. He didn't order. He simply placed both hands on the tabletop, palms down, and waited for someone to pretend that was normal. Mark found his courage in motion. He grabbed the coffee pot and went too fast, knocking the spoon caddy so the little metal mouths chattered. "Refills," he announced like a dare. The Letterman boy flinched. The cook paused with a plate of eggs halfway to the pass. At the clown's booth, Mark stopped. The pot hovered. "You gonna earn it today," he said, the smile already a little thinner than he wanted it to be. "Do a trick. Make a flower spit water. Something." The room tightened. The clown didn't look up. His hands rested flat on either side of the cold cup, steady, as if holding the table together. Lena's eyes flicked from Mark to the brown jacket man and back. The man behind the door did not reappear, but his absence was a weight all its own. Mark leaned closer. "What's the point of the paint if you won't do anything with it?" The clown rose without brushing against him. Close, he smelled like rain and old wood. Up this near, the blue tear on his cheek looked more like a fingerprint than a decoration. He stood still as a photograph. Then, slowly, he lifted a hand and, with a care that asked permission from the air, straightened Mark's crooked name tag. A small turn. A gentle press. It aligned beneath Mark's collarbone like a compass finally finding north. The act was so soft the room exhaled all at once. Mark flushed to the ears. He pulled back as if stung, but there had been no sting. He fumbled the pot. The spout dipped. A thread of coffee slipped over the rim, brown and quick, falling toward the open hand of a little girl who had wandered from her mother to watch the scene. The clown moved before thought, a single unhurried step, one palm open like you might stop a bird from hitting glass. Not a snatch, not a grab, just the exact space the spill needed to meet. The coffee ran onto his skin and darkened the white cuff. He didn't flinch. He set the pot upright with 2 fingers on its cool handle and placed it gently on the counter as if returning a borrowed thing. The girl blinked at her unburned hand. Her mother's thank you dissolved into the hush. The regret arrived like weather. You could feel it, a long, low front passing through each face. The cook's shoulders dropped. The Letterman boy looked down at his book and saw none of its words. Mark stared at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. The brown jacket man watched without moving. His jaw ticked once. He laced his fingers together on the table, the tendons on the back of his hands sharp as cords. He didn't look at Lena, but his presence found her anyway. She went still in that way people do when they remember something they've taught themselves to forget. The clown took a napkin and dabbed at his cuff, careful, thorough, unbothered by the stain. When he finished, he folded the napkin into a small square and placed it beneath the foot of a wobbly sugar caddy at a neighboring table. The wobble vanished. A thing steadied that had been unsteady for years. "Tea?" the cook called out, voice gentler, as if he owed something to the room. He poured hot water without the usual rattle. He slid a plate of toast toward Lena, though she hadn't ordered. She nodded once. Her thumb found the inside of her wrist where the faint circle had begun to fade. Mark opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Aye," he said, and the apology didn't arrive, but its shape did. He took the pot back to its warmer with both hands now, like it mattered not to spill. Outside, clouds were moving in low, the sky the color of tin. A dog trotted across the square and paused by the diner's door as if deciding whether to come in. Somewhere, a train sounded, distant, patient, the kind of horn that takes its time coming through a valley. The brown jacket man finally spoke. "Lena," he said, the name quiet and unkind. His eyes stayed on the clown. "You collecting saints now?" Lena's chair made a small sound as she pushed back. She didn't stand. "Just breakfast," she said, each word wrapped tight as thread on a spool. Her gaze slid to the hallway, then to the window, then back to the clown's bandaged heat in the shape of a damp cuff. Something in her face loosened by a fraction, the slightest permission granted to herself. The man smiled with only one side of his mouth. He tapped a slow rhythm on the table, the kind you measure distance with. Then he tapped no more. "We'll talk," he said. Not a threat, not a promise. A direction. The clown turned toward him at last. No challenge. No plea. In his eyes, the man could see himself, smaller than he liked to imagine. The clown did not look away. He simply remained. In that remaining, something shifted, like a door swelling just enough in its frame to stop closing all the way. A single pigeon landed on the windowsill and watched the room, head cocked, unafraid. The dog outside lay down as if settling in for rain. Mark took a breath and found it steadier than the one before. The courthouse clock lifted its hands toward another hour. In the diner, cups found saucers with a softer touch, and words, when they were used, came out in low tones, shaped to fit the space they entered. But beyond the glass, at the edge where the square gave way to the open field, figures had begun to gather like thoughts forming, slow and inevitable. And the town, tired of pretending not to notice, would soon have to look. Rain teased the town for a while before it decided. The first drops were exploratory, small dark coins scattered on the sidewalk, then a thin sheet that softened the edges of everything. The courthouse stairs, the statue with the missing plaque, the diner's neon pale as a memory. People at the edge of the open field lifted their faces and didn't leave. They weren't a crowd so much as ideas with coats on, an old man from the hardware store with a roll of twine in his fist, 2 women from the church holding a cardboard box between them, a pair of teenagers with their hoods up and their hands jammed deep into their pockets. The brown jacket man watched them from his table as if they were weather, as if they'd pass if ignored. He kept his hands flat, his mouth a careful line. Lena's gaze went through him and out the glass, toward the field. The shape of a decision was beginning to take on weight inside her, and weight changes posture even when no one moves. The clown stood. He did it without sound, the way dusk happens. He glanced to the back hallway once, a check, not a retreat, and then walked to the door. When he touched it, the bell didn't so much ring as inhale. He stepped into the rain and let it have him. He didn't raise his collar. He didn't hurry. The town square met him the way a lake accepts a stone, with ripples that reveal how wide the surface really is. Mark followed to the doorway and hovered there. He held a towel like a flag he didn't mean to wave. The cook came up behind him and pressed an umbrella into his free hand. "Go on," he said, not looking at Mark's face. "He'll catch cold." Mark didn't move. Then he did. Across the street, those figures, that almost crowd, parted without speaking as the clown approached. He stopped before them, not in front of them. He wasn't a wall. He was simply the point where the rain found a stillness to slide around. Up close, you could see what had brought them. A blue notice nailed to a fence post by the field, its corners softening, ink bleeding in the damp. The notice said something official in a language towns learn against their will. Surveyors' stakes showed like thin bones in the grass. The field, the place children ran when they needed to run, where old men taught small bikes to trust, had been counted and was about to be turned into something that would make a sound you couldn't hear over itself. A truck idled by the curb. A man inside pinched a pen over a clipboard and waited for a signature that would make it all easy. The clown stepped closer to the fence and lifted the blue paper by one corner. He didn't tear it down. He held it to the rain so its printed words could drink. Then he let it fall back against the post, gentled by water. He knelt and placed his palm flat in the wet grass just inside the fence. A boy, the Letterman kid from the diner, watched the gesture like a spell. He bent too and spread his hand in the same place, almost touching but not. People who had been careful not to be seen seeing each other leaned in. Mark arrived with the umbrella and stopped a pace away, breathing like he'd run when he hadn't. He looked at the clown, then at Lena, then at the brown jacket man visible through the diner glass, a dark profile, a patience that didn't belong to kindness. Mark opened the umbrella and nearly offered it to the clown, then held it above Lena instead. She accepted nothing with her hands, but she didn't step out from under it either. A county car pulled up, tires whispering on wet. The man from the door at the back of the diner climbed out. Without an apron, he looked like a different kind of person, but the hallway had taught everyone how to read him. He walked to the fence and stood too close to Lena without touching. "You know it's done," he murmured, so soft it was almost respectful. "Papers signed." Lena's jaw tightened, not a fight, a brace. She kept her eyes on the clown's palm on the grass. "There are other kinds of paper," she said, barely moving her mouth. She reached into her pocket and brought out the small gold button. She didn't explain it. She pressed it into the wet earth beside the clown's hand. It sank halfway and held, a small coin of light in the green. The brown jacket man had left his table. He crossed the street without hurrying and came to stand not with the crowd, but adjacent to it, the way a hawk stands apart from crows. He watched Lena, watched the clown, watched Mark with the umbrella he had no right to yet was holding anyway. He said nothing. The rain found his collar and traced his spine. The clown rose. He looked at the fence, then at the people, then at the man with the clipboard who had the kind of patience that comes from hourly pay. The clown walked to the truck, slow. He set his hand, open and empty, on the edge of the clipboard and met the man's eyes. There was no plea in him, no argument. Only the steady gaze of a person who has outlasted storms and learned that some winds blow themselves out if you give them nothing to push against. The pen paused. The man in the truck glanced past the clown at the field, then at the courthouse, then at the diner, where the cook stood behind glass with his hands on the counter the way people hold railings when boats heave. A woman from the church opened the cardboard box and began handing out paper cups. Not coffee. Candles. The kind you use at Christmas Eve services where no one sings at the right pitch but everyone believes their breath is part of something warm. She passed one to the Letterman boy, one to Mark, one to Lena. She offered one to the brown jacket man without looking in his face. He didn't take it. She set it on the fence post anyway, beside the wet blue notice. The clown cupped his candle without lighting it. He held it the way you hold a bird you trust not to fly away. Slowly, carefully, others lit their wicks from a single lighter that clicked, failed, clicked again, then decided. Flame sheltered itself behind palms. The rain should have killed it. It didn't. The field learned a new kind of light. The clipboard man shifted, uncomfortable in a way he couldn't name. He rolled his pen between his fingers and looked toward the county seal on his door like it might answer for him. It didn't. The clown stepped back and stood in the line of small flames, just another flicker among flickers, and by not being important, became the thing the scene arranged itself around. Behind them, the courthouse clock let go of the hour. Its chimes moved through wet air like a measured heart. The brown jacket man reached out, slow, and took the candle from the fence post. He didn't light it. He just held it, testing its weight, as if wondering what kind of person that made him. The rain thinned to a fine thread. A laugh came from somewhere, not joy, release. The open field waited the way animals wait when they know the sound of a gate being lifted. Inside the diner, the fan kept turning, and the empty booth where the clown had sat looked more like a door than a seat. The man with the clipboard finally sighed. Not surrender. The kind of sigh people make when a road is worse than their map. He put the pen behind his ear and closed the folder. "I'll be back," he said to no one in particular, which meant to everyone. He started the truck. He did not drive off. He let the engine idle and watched the candles. He watched the clown's steady face, rain-curled hair stuck to his temple. He watched Lena, whose hands were no longer shaking. He watched Mark, who seemed to be learning how to stand with both feet on the same choice. The engine ticked like a clock with doubts. The town square held its breath in that plain way old towns do when they remember themselves. A pigeon shook water from its wings and settled on the courthouse rail. Somewhere a screen door clapped once and didn't clap again. And at the far edge of the field, beyond the stakes and the notice and the line of small flames, something moved, quiet, patient, as if deciding whether to step into the story at all. What moved at the far edge wasn't a deer and wasn't quite a man, at least not yet. It was a shape in a yellow slicker, shouldering a tripod, the silver mouth of a transit level catching what light the wet day had left. Two more figures followed with tape and flags, their steps sure from practice, their eyes narrowed against rain that had turned to a fine, needling mist. They spoke in those half-words of people who do their work in any weather. The line of candles drew their attention and didn't. The clipboard man watched them come and didn't wave. Lena's candle burned clean. She kept both hands around it like a prayer she didn't use words on. The small gold button glowed dull in the grass by her shoe, water gathering in its groove and spilling over, again and again, like a tiny cup that refused to stay full. Mark shifted the umbrella to spare her from a seam of dripping that had found her shoulder. He said nothing. The silence made a space inside him where words could learn to be careful first. The brown jacket man turned the unlit candle between his fingers, tapping it twice against his palm, as if testing the truth of it with sound. He watched the surveyors the way a dog watches a stranger step over a low fence. He wouldn't stop them. He wouldn't help. He seemed to want to see what the town was willing to show itself. The first surveyor set the tripod and twisted it level, eyes to the scope. He lifted a hand, a lazy semaphore, for a line he couldn't see without help. The second man pulled the tape through the grass, the yellow length dragging its own bright line over the field where children had once mapped games with sticks. When the tape reached the fence, it pushed against the candle's glow and lay there, wet and indifferent. The clown stepped forward. No drama. He stooped and lifted the tape, not to tear it, not to snap it, but to slide it carefully up and over the little fires. The tape rested on his open palms like a tame snake. He held it there, eyes steady on the man at the scope. He wasn't blocking the view, he was lending the line a height it hadn't asked for. The surveyor lowered his hand but didn't look away from his instrument. "Sir," he said, tired, polite, a habit. "Mind." The clown didn't move. He stood as if measuring wind with skin. The surveyor's tone cooled a degree. "We're on schedule." The clown blinked. He breathed. The tape stayed where it was, waiting with him. Something like a sound left the crowd, not a murmur, more a shared exhale. The churchwoman adjusted her grip on her own candle and began, very softly, a hum. Not a hymn anyone could name, just a tune she used to keep her hands steady at wakes. Other voices joined without intending to. The air changed color in the small way air does when people choose to share it. Inside the diner, the cook unlocked the door and stepped onto the stoop with a metal tray. Bread, butter, paper cups of water that might as well have been wine for how carefully he carried them. He held the tray like an offering and moved among the candles, giving out what he had. He didn't make anyone say thank you. When he reached the brown jacket man, he held the tray without meeting his eyes. The man took a slice of bread with a nod that barely counted as a nod. Mark finally spoke, low. "I was wrong," he said, to the clown's shoulder, to the rain, to the part of himself that had stayed boy too long. He didn't wait to be forgiven. He used the umbrella to shelter the tape instead, following the clown's still hands with his own uneasy steadiness. A ridiculous thing, maybe. It helped anyway. The clipboard man's jaw started to ache from holding itself. He looked at the slicker-wrapped crew, at the candles, at the clown who'd become a human post nobody had ordered but everyone was now using. He did a small thing then that changed nothing and somehow changed the hour. He took the pen from behind his ear and put it in his pocket, like a man leaving a meeting he hasn't agreed to. "Give us 15, he said to the surveyors, who pretended not to hear and then heard. The slicker man at the scope straightened, shoulders rising. He glanced at the county car, at the waiting truck, at the soft push of 50 eyes. He was not a villain. He had a calendar. He also had a mother who kept a photograph of him on a swing, feet straight out, field behind him like a held breath. That memory put weight in his hand. He slipped the level into its case. The two others lowered their flags. They didn't leave. They stepped back under the courthouse eaves and let Rain finish sentences they didn't need to say. The field seemed to grow an inch taller. The grass lifted as if uncurling a fist. Lena's shoulders dropped. The button in the dirt became, for a moment, the exact size of the past she was still learning to carry without it cutting. She looked at the clown and found him already looking at her. Something nodded without remark. The brown jacket man struck a match. The tiny flare got stolen by Drizzle, then took anyway. He lit his candle from the smallest flame, not Lena's, not the clown's, and stood in the line, not among them, not apart, exactly where a person stands when he is not ready to put down what he's carried but is too tired to keep shouldering it alone. The light touched the underside of his jaw and made him look younger by an hour he'd never admit he wanted back. On the courthouse steps, the letterman boy held his book under one arm and let Rain touch his hair. He watched the clown's hands until the tape brushed his knuckles. He lifted it gently, imitating care more than understanding it, and the clown's mouth tipped in the barest suggestion of approval. It was nothing you could point to later. It was enough now. The storm began to wander off without apology. The candles looked braver for having been tested. The truck idled slower, as if it too were listening for instructions from a place without radios. The town square remembered how to be itself when no one is asking it to perform. The clown lowered the tape. Without ceremony, he laid it across the fence post where the blue notice had gone the color of ocean glass. He wiped a thumb across the wet ink and left a clean streak that revealed no new words and still told a different story. He didn't bow. He didn't wave. He stood until the standing had said what needed saying. Then, with a patience that felt like whether deciding to spare the porch, he turned back toward the diner, toward the booth that had become a door, toward the hallway that remembered a voice closing a door too carefully. Lena fell into step beside him, not touching, stepping when he stepped, stopping when he stopped. Mark folded the umbrella under his arm and found he was taller when he didn't hide behind it. They reached the threshold. The bell lifted its small sound into the thinning air. Behind them, the field kept their shapes a moment longer than it should have, like a photograph that doesn't fade right away. But just as their feet found dry tile again, another car rolled into the square. Not county, not construction, and a woman stepped out with a folder pressed flat against her chest, her eyes set like a person who has walked a long way to say something that cannot stay unsaid. She closed her car door with the kind of care that keeps a secret from breaking. Rain ticked in the seams. A strand of hair stuck to her cheek, and she didn't lift a hand to move it. The folder clutched to her chest had corners that had learned too many tables. She took in the candles, the held faces, the field pinned with wet flags. Her gaze brushed the clown and paused, not recognition, exactly, but the ease of naming a center without words. Inside the diner, the bell had barely settled. The clown stood just inside the doorway, water purling off the red leather of his shoes. Lena drifted 2 steps farther and stopped, as if a string tied at her wrist had tightened. Mark hovered with a towel, then set it on the counter instead, deciding the world did not need his chaperone. The woman with the folder crossed the street. The brown jacket man watched her without moving, his candle cupped, its small heat carving a space in the damp. The clipboard man slid his pen back out of his pocket and then, embarrassed by his own reflex, slid it back in. At the threshold, the woman looked past her reflection in the glass and nodded once. To the cook, to the booths, to the story she had walked into. She stepped over the sill. The folder darkened where rain kissed it. She held it close anyway. "Lena," she said. Not a question. The syllables had the care of old friendship or an office where 2 women share staplers and gossip about nothing to avoid crying about something. Lena raised her chin a fraction. The woman's mouth softened. "I should have called." The hallway breathed its sour lemon again, as if remembering the click of that back door. The clown turned his face toward it, then back to the woman, an axis found and refound. He did not blink more than he had to. The woman flipped the folder open with both hands. No flourish. Paper with blue stamps and black signatures. A map that made straight lines where there were not. "They filed the easement wrong," she said, voice soft enough that the coffee pot didn't feel shouted at. "Back in '98. Wrong parcel number. It can be." Paused. A hum moved through the diner, unbelief's small cousin. The cook leaned forward like a man at low tide learning a sandbar's name. Mark's hand found the towel again and then didn't need it. The clipboard man took a step in without meaning to. Paused is not saved," the woman said, polite as rain. "But it is not today." Her eyes went to the clown, as if thanking the room for sending something impossible and necessary to hold the hour still until she could arrive. At the back, the door that had clicked closed earlier let out a cough of air, a draft from the storeroom. The man from that doorway appeared, apron back on now like armor. He froze when he saw the woman. His mouth opened, then folded in on itself. The clown's head tilted by a breath's width, reading the way weather reads trees. Lena took a step toward the woman. "How long?" she asked. "A week. Maybe 2. The woman's thumb rubbed at a grease spot on the map as if tenderness could erase ink. "Long enough to think." The brown jacket man's candle swam in his cupped hands, unreal in daylight. He stood beside the door, not in it, and watched every face choose how to hold this new space. His own chose nothing. That was its choice. The clown moved. He didn't take the papers. He didn't explain them. He reached for the sugar caddy with the napkin shim he'd placed earlier and pressed his palm flat on it until it held. Then he stepped to the counter, lifted the crooked placard that read "Seated by staff only," and turned it a precise quarter turn so it sat level. Little corrections, small anchors. The room altered its shoulders. "Why are you doing this?" the clipboard man asked the woman, but he looked at the clown when he said it. "This is my job," she answered, still watching the clown. "Also," her breath hitched once, barely. "My mother taught in that brick school at the edge of the field." It's not an excuse. It's context. From the corner, a chair leg squeaked. The letterman boy set his book down open to the rain-blurred page and stepped inside, hair dripping, eyes bright with a concentration that didn't belong to sports. He stood near the clown, as if standing near a steady clock. The man from the back hallway cleared his throat and failed to find words. He tried again. "Lee," he said to the woman. "You sure?" Her name gathered in the air like steam on a porcelain lid. "I am sure of the numbers," she said. "The rest is not mine to be sure of." She slid the papers toward the counter without forcing anyone's hand toward them. The clown placed his warm, coffee-damp palm on the stack for a second. Not to claim. To bless, maybe. To steady the flutter. When he lifted it away, the top sheet lay calmer, as if convinced. Outside, the surveyors huddled under the eaves, hats in their hands, listening without moving closer. One of them scratched his name on the inside of his wrist where a watch would go, a nervous habit, ink beating like rain. Lena exhaled a note that might, in another life, have become a laugh. "A week," she repeated, like a person tasting a word for its salt. Her thumb touched the faint circle on her wrist. The mark had almost disappeared. The brown jacket man spoke at last, low. "Somebody will be unhappy." He didn't specify who. The town heard his meaning anyway. The clown turned to him, that steady, unblaming gaze that holds and holds until something else has to set itself down. The man looked away first. He lifted his candle and found, to his annoyance, that the flame had begun to matter. Rain thinned into a rumor of rain. The field breathed. The courthouse clock, surprised to still be part of the scene, thought about chiming and decided to wait. The woman closed her folder halfway and didn't close it all the way. "I can file the hold by afternoon," she said. "But I'll need names." She looked at the room, at the town. "Who is this for?" The cook wiped his hands and said the name of the school. The churchwoman said the name of a creek that would be buried. The letterman boy, quieter than he knew how to be, said the name of a game played between two trees. Lena didn't say a name. She reached into her pocket and brought out nothing. The gold button was in the earth, choosing to stay. The clown said nothing, as always, and in that silence several names found the courage to exist aloud. The woman nodded. She tucked a damp strand behind her ear at last. "Then we'll start there." The clown stepped back into his booth, as if returning to a shore he had never left. He didn't sit. He waited, a held note in a song that didn't need instruments. The town arranged itself around the new center of its day, and pretended not to notice that it had done so. Outside, wind brushed the field like a hand smoothing a child's hair in sleep. A pigeon from the courthouse rail lifted, turned once over the diner roof, and chose a different angle of sky. But beneath the relief moving through the square like warm water, a cooler current slipped along the bottom, quiet and sure, the kind that gathers in corners and decides, with patience, to rise. Afternoon tilted toward evening the way a book closes itself after you've walked away. The candles thinned to little domes of wax, each with a black wick folded like a thought put away for later. People drifted, not to leave but to make room for what had arrived. The woman with the folder, Lee, tucked the papers under her arm and headed for the courthouse, rain pearls along the edge like a border of patience. The surveyors smoked under the eaves, their heads together, not plotting, just making a small weather of their own. Inside the diner, steam moved slow on the windows. The cook washed a pan twice and then set it down gently, a thing forgiven. Mark wrote something on the specials chalkboard, then erased it, then wrote less. The clown remained standing in his booth, hands resting on the seat back as if steadying a child on a bicycle. Lena watched the field through a stripe the towel had cleared on the glass. Her posture open like someone who has decided to stop folding in on herself, at least for the hour. The brown jacket man finished his candle by pinching 2 fingers around the wick. He put the stub in his pocket, a small warm lie he'd carry until it cooled. He glanced toward the back hallway, then toward the courthouse, then to Lena. He almost spoke. He didn't. He left so quietly the bell sounded like someone remembering a word and then not needing it. Dusk took the square with 2 hands. The neon hummed itself into relevance. A train's horn passed a long way off, the note stretched thin, like a thread pulled through fabric and not breaking. Lee's silhouette crossed the lit windows of the clerk's office and disappeared deeper into the building, her folder now part of the building's breath. Lena stood. "I need to close the nursery," she said to no one, to herself. She gathered her coat, her keys, her steadiness. On impulse that looked like instinct, Mark reached for the umbrella again and then stopped halfway, unsure where to place his wanting to help. The clown only turned and followed her out, a shadow that refused to darken anything. The street toward the nursery ran narrow between houses that had learned to lean. Porch lights clicked on, one by one moths wrote soft equations in their glow. The clown walked half a step behind Lena, not guarding so much as keeping time. Their shoes made that old song of wet on old pavement. They did not speak. They didn't need to. At the nursery, the sign squeaked on its chain. Green Shoals Growers. A row of clay pots tilted like heads in prayer along the sill. Inside, rows of seedlings held their breath in the dim. Lena unlocked the door and paused. The air smelled of soil and citrus leaves and something else. Pennies, maybe. A back latch hung open that she was sure she had shut. She stood in the threshold an extra heartbeat, then clicked on a lamp with a shade that threw little flower shapes onto the ceiling. From the far end of the greenhouse, a draft slid its palm along the plastic walls. A chime that hadn't chimed in months tinked once, as if remembering. The clown did not enter. He took his place beneath the awning, rain dripping off its lip into a steady thin thread. He lifted one red shoe to press a wedge of cardboard firmer beneath a crooked table leg. He straightened a toppled steak with a paper label that read, "Milkweed," and the way he touched it made the word sound like a promise. Lena moved to the register, checked the till, closed it with 2 fingers. She knelt to retie the twine on a tray of starts and felt the old circle on her wrist ghost against the metal corner. She looked up at the glass. In it, she saw her face, and behind it, his, quiet, pale, patient. In the reflection, another shape formed, a sedan across the street, lights off, engine off, a presence that made no claim and needed none to be felt. A figure in the driver's seat did not move. The clown lifted his eyes and met the place where a gaze might be. He didn't lift a hand or his chin. He just stayed, a standing stone in a small storm. The sedan's brake lights, red as doubt, flared once and went dark. After a long minute, the starter whined, and the car slid away with the kind of politeness that chooses another road because it can. Lena exhaled through her nose. Slow. She turned off the lamp, then on again, then left it on. She brought out a watering can and walked the aisles, wetting each tray like a benediction. The clown stood under the awning until the last droplet slid from its seam and fell clean. He reached to the door and, with the softest insistence, pushed the back latch into place until it caught and held. The sound was a small click, but the kind that finds the spine. They locked up together without deciding to. On the walk back, a dog they didn't know took up with them briefly, then veered off toward a yard that smelled like supper. At the square, the candles were small hills now, cooled to pale puddles with wicks like thin spines. Someone had set the blue notice flat on the fence to dry. The button Lena had pressed into the earth had disappeared under a skin of dark mud. She touched the spot anyway. It was enough. In the diner, the cook had set 2 bowls of soup on the counter without looking up. Mark had written soup on the board and underlined it like a secret only good people told each other. The clown took his bowl to the booth and waited for Lena to sit. He broke his bread in half and placed the larger piece on her saucer. She smiled with her eyes, just a little, as if learning how. The courthouse lights clicked off one by one. The square settled into its night shape. Somewhere a screen door closed with care, and then, after a breath, closed again with something else in it. And beneath the quiet, at the field's far edge where the dark collects, a stake inched out of the ground as if lifted by nothing more than a patient hand and set back down an inch to the left, where it would be harder to notice until morning. Night folded the town in, careful as a quilt pulled to the chin. Street lamps cast their small moons, each with its own moth constellations. The courthouse clock kept time like an old man tapping a cane, patient, certain. In the diner, the last chairs were turned upside down on the tables. The cook counted bills with the thrift of someone who had survived thinner nights. Mark swept in long, thoughtful strokes that didn't push dust so much as persuade it to gather itself. The clown stepped outside and let the door's whisper settle. He stood on the sidewalk and listened to the shape of the dark. A far train stitched a slow seam through the valley. Somewhere, a porch swing creaked with no one in it. The square was a held bowl. The wind was the hand. He moved toward the field the way fog moves, present before it is noticed. The candles there were only pale buttons now, small scars on the evening. The blue notice lay flat against the fence like a tired flag. The grass wore rain as memory. At the far edge, a figure unbent from the night and bent again, drawing a white string taut between two stakes. The line sang lightly as it stretched. The clown stopped a few paces away. He set his red shoes in the damp earth as if planting. The figure straightened, the man from the back hallway, apron gone, a jacket zipped up to his throat. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look brave. He held a mallet loosely, not like a threat, more like a thought he hadn't decided to have. A headlamp cut a sharp coin on his forehead. Its light made his eyes bright and unkind to read. "Counties paused," he said, voice low because the night deserves it. "Doesn't mean time has to be." He lifted the mallet a little, like testing weight. The clown didn't move. He let the silence grow soft around the two of them until it drew breath on its own. The man shifted. "You don't live here," he said, as if facts could be used as shovels. The clown turned his palm up, empty, a pocket offered. He stepped closer, only one step, enough to be in the circle of light. Paint made him pale, the blue tear made him human, the steadiness made him heavier than his body. He put his hand on the line as one might put a hand on a horse's neck. Calm, not asking. The string stopped singing. The grass took back the small sound. From the street, a car engine murmured, then dimmed. The brown jacket man leaned against a lamppost 20 yards away, the posture of someone who'd meant to leave and discovered he was the kind who waits. He said nothing. He watched like a weather vane, not the wind, the truth of it. The man with the mallet breathed through his nose. Sweat or drizzle beaded at his temple. "Town thinks candles fix deeds," he said, but his voice wasn't angry enough to hold the sentence upright. He glanced toward the square, toward the nursery window, even though its light was gone. "Rent's due," he added in a tone that meant other things were due, too, and had been, and the ledger had been kept inside his ribs. The clown placed the mallet's head gently against the ground with 2 fingers. Not taking, not wrestling, resting. The man's grip loosened by its own surprise. The clown's other hand lifted and pressed. Not hard, not to force. Just a steady human presence against the man's shoulder, as if to say, "You don't have to drive this nail tonight." A night bird called once, a clean note. The courthouse clock answered with nothing. Sometimes the answer is not a sound. Mark appeared at the fence's edge, hair damp, breath visible in a thin thread. He carried nothing that could be used for anything but witnessing. He didn't come closer. He folded his hands in front of him like he was in the kind of church that knows how to be quiet. The brown jacket man didn't turn his head, but his attention widened to make room for the boy. The man with the mallet set his jaw and let it go again. "Who are you to me?" he asked the clown. The question not really asked to the person in paint, but to the version of himself that had learned to make rooms small. The clown lowered his hand. He stepped back 1 pace, drew air in, let it out. He straightened one of the already straight stakes and pulled a bit of grass free that had wrapped it like a loose string. He looked at the man with a patience that made the question smaller without answering it. Then he reached into his coat pocket and brought out the folded napkin he had pressed under the sugar caddy earlier. Thin, damp, ordinary. He used it to wipe the mud from the mallet's metal until it caught a dull glow from the headlamp. He offered the mallet back, handle first, as if returning a tool to its right-sized use. Something unwound in the man's throat. He took the mallet and let his arm fall to his side. He looked at the white string as if seeing, at last, that it had been pulled too tight for what it had to hold. He loosened the knot by a fraction. The song returned, gentler. He stepped out of the headlamp's circle, and the halo followed his leaving. "Tomorrow," he said to the air, a word that contained retreat without surrender. He turned toward the diner's back door and walked into the part of night that keeps confidences. The brown jacket man stayed where he was. He lit no cigarette. He made no call. He watched the clown wipe his own hands clean on the napkin and slip it away. Mark let out a breath he'd been saving. I thought he stopped, remembering how to let sentences end when they should. Thank you, he said, and heard the word as if it were someone else's voice coming into his mouth and deciding to stay there a while. The clown touched the fence where Lena's button had gone into the earth. He pressed his fingers to the spot and felt for the cool circle he could not see. He stayed like that a long moment. When he lifted his hand, he straightened, rolled his shoulders once, as if setting weight where it belongs so it doesn't bruise. They walked back through the square that had learned a new way to hold night. House by house, lamps went out. A dog tested the edge of a bark and decided against it. The diner's bell didn't sound. Some doors don't need to mark return. The clown paused under the courthouse steps and looked up at the statue with the blank plaque. He rested his palm against the stone base, long enough to borrow its cold, long enough to leave a little heat. Mark stopped at the chalkboard and, without thinking too much, wrote "Morning" in careful letters, then set the chalk down like a man placing a small white bone back where he found it. He turned off the neon. He left the doors locked to the cook, trusting the sound it would make. The clown stood in the middle of the empty street and closed his eyes. He listened a last time to make sure the town was sleeping safely, the way someone listens outside a child's room even when the child has learned to breathe without being reminded. But beyond the square, in a kitchen where papers had been spread too far and a phone lay face down to keep it from listening, another choice was being counted out. Slow, cold, and certain, and it would arrive with the first light as if it had always belonged to morning. Morning didn't arrive so much as loosen its hand. The square came back in grays first, the statue's shoulders, the diner's windows, the field's slick grass holding yesterday like a low fever. A bread truck hissed to a stop, and the driver lowered 3 crates as if setting down sleeping animals. Somewhere, a radio tried on a song and changed its mind. The clown was already walking, coat buttoned high, red shoes dulled by dew. He passed the courthouse steps and touched the cold rail with 2 fingers, a small greeting. The neon inside the diner hadn't decided yet. The chalkboard still said "Morning" in the careful hand of a boy who had practiced wanting to be kinder. On the nursery street, the sky lightened the glass to a soft blue that made the leaves inside look like they were keeping their own weather. The sign, "Green Shoals Growers," swung without sound. A sedan waited at the curb with the stalling patience of official business. A woman stepped out, not young, not old, hair pinned in a way that hoped to be invisible. 2 men got out behind her with tool bags that had the tidy clink of wrenches used for doors. Papers rode against the woman's chest the way papers do when they intend to change which side of a threshold belongs to whom. Lena rounded the corner at a small run that made no noise, keys in a fist. She slowed when she saw the car. Her hand went to her pocket and found it empty. The button in the earth could not help with this. The woman met her halfway and lowered her eyes before she spoke. "Ms. Klein," she said, the syllables folded to fit the morning. "I left messages." "Power was out," Lena said, though it hadn't been. She looked past the woman to the men with the bags. One had a smile for emergencies, the other didn't have a face yet, only a posture. "It's a rekey," the woman said. "Temporary. Standard." Lena nodded as if learning weather has a policy. She lifted the padlock off the latch and set it gently in the woman's hand as if returning a borrowed salt shaker. She didn't plead. She didn't argue. Her throat made the small motion of a person swallowing a sentence for later. The clown stepped under the awning. He didn't insert himself, only became part of the doorway in the way shade becomes part of a tree. The men with the bags moved past him, then slowed without quite knowing why, adjusting the weight of metal as if it had asked to be carried quieter. The woman from the car set her papers on a potting bench and weighed them with a terracotta saucer. The top page showed blocks of words and neat boxes waiting for signatures. The clown's eyes slid over the ink and then stopped on Lena's hand. Open, still, the ridge of an old circle faint in the new light. He reached for a watering can and, without looking at anyone, carried it to the trays along the front edge, tipping just enough into each to make the soil darken and hold. He watered until the sound became part of the morning's explanation. Mark arrived breathless, his apron crooked, carrying a to-go box with steam sneaking out the corners. He didn't ask what was happening, the papers said it. He set the box beside the folder and opened it. 2 biscuits. Butter in thin gold packets. He tore one open and placed half on the saucer that kept the documents from curling. "Coffee in a minute," he said to the sidewalk. The brown jacket man stood across the street, hands in his pockets, unreadable as a closed store. He watched the locksmith sort little teeth into a palm. He watched the clown lift a fallen plant marker and press it back into its bed. Milkweed. The word sat straight now. The first turn of a new key made a sound like a note from a tired harmonica. The locksmith paused, looked at the woman, looked at the clown, then finished the turn. Inside, the chime that remembered itself last night spoke again, not bright, but clear. The door didn't open. Not yet. The woman took a breath from low down where stubbornness keeps its hat. "This isn't mine to want," she said to no one, which is how truth comes when it has to step carefully. "I'm only to deliver." Lee appeared then, hair damp with the day's first thinking, folder tucked under her arm. She had walked fast. She was not out of breath. She stopped, saw the locksmith's tools, saw Lena's hands, saw the clown's watering can making rain happen where it was wanted. "I filed the pause," she said. "Not triumph. Fact. County can't touch the field this week." "It isn't the field," the woman said, gentler now. She tapped the page not to assert but to remind. "It's arrears." A boy on a bicycle wheeled by slow, dragging a foot to make a soft rubber hum. He looked long at the clown, then at Lena, then pushed off again the way a thought leaves and promises to return. The clown set the can down and wiped his palm on his coat, as if returning the morning to its own work. He lifted the seasonal sale sign that had fallen behind a barrel, shook off a film of damp, and leaned it against the door where the key was new. Then he turned and looked at the square. The look wasn't a call. It was a mirror placed in sunlight. People began to arrive as if they had been already on their way to somewhere, and realized this was the place. The churchwoman with a brown paper bag of envelopes that still smelled like last year's candles. The hardware man with twine and the exact face of practical mercy. The letterman boy with his book under his arm like proof he could read daylight. The cook, wiping his hands on nothing, carried a coffee urn that ran a line of heat ahead of him. No one made speeches. The cook found an extension cord and the outlet that always worked on the second try. The urn burbled into itself. The churchwoman placed her envelopes not in a basket but straight on the bench by the papers, like leaves fallen in order. The hardware man tied a sign to the fence that read open, the "a little too round." Mark wrote prices on a chalk slate with numbers that were guesses dressed as decisions. The woman from the sedan looked down at her neat boxes and then up at the nursery as the clown reached for the bell rope and pulled just enough to let it say morning. She set her pen across the paper like a bridge and stepped back. "I can be late," she said, the smallest rebellion. "That's mine to want." Lena's hands found work. Guiding, nodding, holding a tray from below instead of the sides so the tender roots would not shake. She moved like a person reminding her body what it knew before fear taught it to stand still. The brown jacket man crossed the street without his hands pretending he had somewhere else to be. He picked up a pot and turned it in his fingers the way people examine choices. He put money on the bench without being asked to sign anything. The locksmiths zipped their bags shut. "We'll come back," one said, not promising, not threatening. The new key lay on the bench like a small, mistaken map. The clown cupped a seedling that had fallen sideways and pressed its stem back toward upright with 2 fingers and a patience that would outlast weather. He didn't look at Lena when he did it. He didn't need to. His stillness filled the place where fear had been sitting. The courthouse clock found its hour and offered it, one soft chime at a time. The square took it. The field held it. And somewhere just past the edge of town, an engine gathered itself without hurry. The kind of engine that comes with a logo on the door and a paper on the seat. And the day, for all its small mercies, made a quiet space for its arrival. The engine showed itself with a white hood cresting the rise, then the rest. A van the color of office paper, logo modest, stenciled letters that did not need to be read to be obeyed. It rolled into the square and idled like a throat clearing. The driver wore a tie done without a mirror and a face trained to look past people and into forms. Beside him, a woman in a slate cardigan clicked a pen once, twice, and then rested it on the pad so it would behave. They did not hurry. They did not hesitate. They inhabited the middle of the road because the middle had been granted to them many times before. At Green Shoals Growers, morning had opened itself. Twine was measured, cash exchanged for little squares of green, cups of coffee warmed hands and decisions. Lee stood off to the side, checking her watch only to discover it was not the instrument the hour was using. The locksmiths had not returned. The new key lay under a terracotta saucer beside the biscuit crumbs, an object waiting to learn its purpose. The van stopped where the field begins, pretending not to be a field. The driver stepped out and straightened his tie. He surveyed candles reduced to wax moons and stakes nudged out of true. His gaze made a quiet inventory. The woman in the cardigan came around and did not adjust her hair when the wind asked her to. Her shoes found the exact middle between puddles without looking down. They crossed toward the nursery with the purpose of water seeking a drain. Lena felt them before she saw them. The skin at her wrist remembered the circle. She lifted the tray from her hands to the bench and slid her palms along her skirt to dry what the morning had not made wet. The clown, standing a little back beneath the awning, turned his face toward the approaching pair. His expression did not change. His posture did, by a hair, enough to remake the doorway into a held line. The driver smiled. Not warmth. Policy softened to look like it. "Miss Klein?" he asked, voice politely empty. The cardigan woman uncapped her pen and set the pad on the hood of the van, spine to the sky. Lena nodded. She did not step forward. The churchwoman placed herself to Lena's left without speaking, envelopes quiet in her hands. The hardware man found a place to lean that did not look like leaning. Mark came from the diner carrying a cardboard box that once held oranges and now held small bills, a soup of generosity dressed as commerce. Lee stood on the near side of the awning and felt the weight of her folder become less useful than the weight of her body simply being there. "We'll need to conduct a brief inventory," the driver said. He gestured to the racks of seedlings as if they were chairs at a meeting. "Then we'll coordinate a change of custody." He said it like weather. The clown stepped once, not a block, an alignment. He reached for the seasonal sale sign and adjusted it until its feet sat even. Then he took the watering can and poured a slow line along the threshold so the dust would settle into something like ground. The small stream made a clean, dark border that neither asked nor permitted a foot to step through thoughtlessly. The cardigan woman noticed. She looked at the wet edge, at the clown's steady hand, at the faces assembled without flair. She lowered her pen for a beat, then raised it again. "We understand this is difficult," she said. She might have meant it. Her voice did not. Lee cleared her throat with the authority of someone who has learned where to place paper so it cannot be ignored. "The field is paused," she said, eyes steady on the driver. "Easement error under review. As for the nursery," she laid her palm flat on the counter, "the owner is within grace if the arrears are attempted in good faith. There is demonstrable attempt." The driver's smile tilted. "Attempt is not remittance." "Attempt is time," Lee said, not louder, but closer. The van's engine ticked as it cooled. A moth, late to its night, worried the air between two hanging ferns and refused to choose. The brown jacket man separated himself from a shadow and came to stand with his hands in his pockets near the cardboard box that held small bills. He took out his candle stub and put it on the bench as if it were currency. The churchwoman saw him do it and, without looking at him, did not move it away. The driver tried again, consulting a sheet that had been printed for days like this. "We can seal the premises for 48 hours, he offered, like mercy. "No sales. No ingress." Lena's breath left her and returned slower. The clown put the watering can down. He reached into his coat and took out the napkin folded to a small square. The same thin paper that had steadied a sugar caddy, dried a mallet. He unfolded it once, twice, as if showing the morning a trick that wasn't a trick, how a small soft thing could be many exact sizes. He laid it on the new wet line like a bridge and placed, atop it, the plain key. Then he stepped back and looked at the driver, and then at the cardigan woman, and then at the town that had arranged itself around this hinge in the day. No words followed. They were not needed. The napkin kept the key from touching the wet. The key kept the napkin from blowing away. The small order of these facts was a door you had to walk through with your eyes open. The driver studied the arrangement longer than he meant to. He kept one hand on the form, the other on the pen that had become heavier than its ink. The cardigan woman looked at Lena's open hands, the envelopes, the orange box, the faces, these separate weights that, together, became a different math. Her pen hesitated, did a small, bookish shiver, and went still. "We can come back at noon," she said, a sentence that sounded like breathing. "Inventory then. If necessary." "If necessary," Lee repeated, polite as a fence. The driver exhaled through his nose, a man recalculating routes. "Noon," he agreed, which was both retreat and appointment. He capped his pen. He did not take the key. He did not step over the wet line, and he did not pretend not to notice that he had chosen not to. They went back to the van without looking hurried. The engine spoke and then softened as it turned toward the far end of town. The square did not cheer. The town arranged its shoulders, as if a coat had been removed that no one had realized was too tight. Lena let her hands fall to the counter and pressed her palms to the wood until it remembered her. The clown stood in the same place he had been standing, as if carved from breath. He lifted the napkin and folded it again, slow, a ritual of return, and slid it back into his pocket. He left the key where it was, gleaming like a small, obedient star. The churchwoman opened the first envelope. Coins spoke their hoarse little clatter. The hardware man counted under his breath as if measuring twine. Mark dropped his day's tips into the orange box and did not look up to see who saw. The brown jacket man bought 3 pots he did not need and carried them like a person learning what hands are for. The courthouse clock, late by a minute and shameless about it, offered the hour. The field listened. The candles' wax moons shone like found shells. And from the diner's back hallway, a door closed not carefully this time, but with the sound of someone who had decided something and would have to live with the size of that sound.